Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. I've decided to try doing at least an approximation of the whole thing I talked about yesterday with concert jumps. Don't have anything to really show because it's going to take me too long, other than maybe one or two. But so the scenario comes up with people sometimes that love music and love live music, where you got concerts on the same, they're scheduled on the same night, two different venues in the same city even, or nearby cities, and so you often have to decide, you go to one and not the other, or sometimes you have more than one. It's not a festival per se exactly, it's just, yeah, they're in two different venues and they happen to be on the same evening, and sometimes I kind of wonder why the bands didn't try to the promoters didn't try to book them together. Sometimes when they're related genres, especially there was the Marillion shows I saw in Chicago. One of the nights, Dream Theater was there actually. So yeah, that's happened to me. There's been a few times where I didn't, like one totally like example. I would have loved to have done this. Somehow there were three. This is probably the one of the ultimate sort of conflict of concerts. Well, there was one Coheed and Cambria and Avenged Sevenfold show that was on the same night as like Block Party, I think. Can't remember, but I didn't go, and I know it was the longest time before I ever saw Coheed and Cambria, and then I still have yet to see Avenged Sevenfold. So that was one. I know the weather wasn't great that night, but the other one that comes to mind was the same night I saw the first time I saw Menomina at the Varsity Theater with Brent Knopf in 2010. I had bought a ticket for Foals to play at the Entry at First Avenue, and then next door in the main room, headlining was Of Montreal, who I didn't really have much of an interest to see. However, the opener was Janelle Monáe, who actually one of the members, Kevin Barnes, sang on Janelle Monáe's album. That was all in 2010, the same night. I ended up going down to First Avenue. I don't know if I gave my ticket away or sold for the full show because I couldn't do it. I could have tried to do it. Just the timing would have been just a little too difficult. I didn't want to miss Menomina because I had missed Menomina a few years earlier when the Faceless had played at Varsity or at Station 4, and I had to choose between those two. So, and I never would have seen, if I would have skipped the Menomina show and gone to Foals and Janelle, or just Foals or whatever, I would have never seen Brent with Menomina. So that was my sort of regretful opportunity to try to do the concert jump. But the times I have done it, a few times, have been pretty rewarding for the most part. So I'll just go down. So the first one I found on my list, I might have missed it, November 19th, 2005. You had Jethro Tull playing at the State Theater in Minneapolis. And I think I had not seen Jethro Tull at that point and ever live. And I also, that was like, yeah, that was right around the time, not that long after I'd become somewhat of a pretty big Jethro Tull fan, although I still am, but I can't necessarily claim I know their whole catalog, beginning to end. But yeah, that was a big deal to finally see them. I know they played, I think they played Stairway to Heaven with a violinist, this young violinist woman, Asian woman. Anyway, so that same night though, at Star Central in North Minneapolis, or North Minneapolis, Wishbone Ash, who I'm not that big of a fan of Wishbone Ash, but I always have, when I was introduced to the Argus album especially, I enjoyed it. They have the one song that sounds like, it's called like not floating, something like Flying World or something like that. It sounds like Yes. So the timing worked out that I ended up seeing Jethro Tull, and in fact I ended up getting a complimentary ticket that night, I think. Gonna think about it. But yeah, I saw Tull, and then I just jumped out and headed to my car and drove up to Star Central, which is, I don't know, 15-20 minutes away from State Theater in Minneapolis. It's like a 15-minute, it's not that far because it's just, North Minneapolis is on the outskirts of downtown in effect. So, and I don't know what time Tull finished. They probably finished about 10 o'clock, and Wishbone Ash did not start till probably close to 11, so or maybe 10:45. Anyway, I saw Wishbone Ash too, and that was great. I think actually the night after I saw King's X there, to look at my history, but that was a crazy time. November, right before Thanksgiving in 2005. Let's see here. Pretty sure, just knowing, Yep, King's X was not the night after with Castanatra at Star Central. So anyway, so that's the first one. The second one, which I'm taking a little bit of a liberty because this wasn't really all that difficult to do. This was at the Taste of Minnesota in 2006, which the ironic thing about this was my future girlfriend and fiance and wife was actually at the second thing I saw. It was Roger Hodgson of Supertramp, July 2nd, 2006, at the Taste of Minnesota on Harriet Island in St. Paul. I saw him and then went to see Davy Jones, which was a pretty forgettable show. Or forgettable show wouldn't be the best. Disappointing show for my wife, I guess, but I didn't know she was there. But my friend was yelling out Pleasant Valley Sunday half the time, and she remembers someone from the back yelling that out, my friend John. But yeah, Roger Hodgson, Davy Jones. Grant, that's a little bit of a liberty. It's not really that much of a concert jump because they're both at Taste of Minnesota. They both were free shows. And anyway, so that was 2006 though. So later that year, a couple months later, this was like sort of in the thick of my Caddisfly fandom. I would do anything and everything to see them live. I'd seen them a few months before. I talked about in previous concert memories video. They played at the Toy Box. It's called the Toy Box club. What do you want to call it? Not a theater. The Toy Box Club off of Hiawatha in Minneapolis, with the opening band being Cue the Doves. I remember the pizza at that place is kind of good. That's not around sadly anymore. But anyway, they played with those. Caddisfly and Cue the Doves played that night. And then, of course, I had seen, was it 3 weeks before, something like 3 or 4 weeks before, Mew opened for Kasabian at the Fine Line Music Cafe. Well, they were somehow later booked. I don't know what happened, or just when they booked that tour, they got some headline dates when they came over to play supporting and the Glass-Handed Kites, and they headlined at Fine Line. Well, and I wanted to hang out with the Caddisfly guys and just, it reminds me of one I'm forgetting here, but I wanted to hang out with them and, chat it up and everything like that. It's great to see them. They're from Portland, Oregon, but I was so intent on trying to see Mew too because I was totally getting into them and I'd never seen them headline. Unfortunately, so I spent maybe 15, 20 minutes after the show talking to Caddisfly, and then I bought the Four Seasons EP that show and one for a friend of mine, Nate. But then I headed down to the Fine Line downtown because Hiawatha's, in Minneapolis, but not in downtown. That took me like 15, 20 minutes. Unfortunately, I think Mew, by the point that Caddisfly finished, we're about to go on stage probably, because I got down there and Mew played, I think, 2 songs and an encore, so I really didn't catch that much of the show. I can't remember if I even bought a ticket. I probably had, and sometimes with the Fine Line back then, you could just walk up if it was toward the end of the show and they just let you in. And they don't let you do that at a lot of other venues like the Varsity or even First Avenue, but they would let you do that at the Fine Line. They'd get some liquor sales maybe, I don't know. So I got to see that. I know that I didn't get to talk to the Mew guys afterwards. A little kind of saddened by that because I did a few weeks before, but I kind of learned that was kind of their approach. Later they became very fan-friendly. But anyway, so moving on, that was in 2006, October 26th. October 23rd, about a year later, 2007, the Appleseed Cast, I ended up seeing. I'd wanted to see them for a little while. Their album Peregrine, which I have on vinyl, I'll show someday. I was really getting into that record from 2006. It was less than a year. It was like a year later, but they played the entry with a band called Figurines and Dappled Cities. It's entry attached to First Avenue. I don't know I know that was an early show. I know they mentioned that on the, we're sorry our show had to be early and all this stuff. But for me, it really worked out because then later that night, maybe like 9, 10 o'clock, because the Appleseed Cast probably went on stage about 6. It was early. Because I went right after work and everything. Do Make Say Think played with the band called Apostle Hustle at the Varsity Theater. Do Make Say Think, the post-rock band with some of the members, if I'm not mistaken, have played with either Broken Social Scene. Yeah, I think it's just Broken Social Scene. Anyway, but yeah, Do Make Say Think were really good. In fact, I kind of think I prefer them live more than the studio albums overall. But sadly, that's the only time I ever saw them. But I'm glad I didn't miss any of them. So I saw Appleseed Cast is kind of post-rock too. So I had double poster. That would be a perfect case if Appleseed, Cast, and Do Makes They Think could have been on the same bill, but they're not on the same tour. So, but that was at the Varsity Theater. So I went from the entry to the Varsity, which are, again, 15 minutes away. So, all right, so this one, it was just a couple weeks later, I consider sort of my masterpiece of doing this. November 7th, 2007, like a week after Halloween, I bought tickets to see the band Annuals. I think I'd already seen Annuals at least once or twice. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But I really like them live. They do these drum jams. One of like 5 or 6 bands that do drum jams that I loved around that time, from about 2006 to 2015 or whatever it was. But so then that show I was planning to see, but then I don't know, Dethklok. This was a big deal because there's this band called Dethklok based on that animated thing Megapocalypse on Adult Swim on Comedy Central. They were doing a show at the Kauffman Memorial Union in Minneapolis, which isn't that far from the Varsity Theater. They're both on the U of M, University of Minnesota's campus, different parts of it. The biggest reason why I wanted to see Dethklok, I didn't actually even know the music that well, was because one Mike Keneally was actually part of that band, and it was a sold-out show, I think, but I was kind of intent on going to that. Mike Keneally was friends with Kevin Gilbert. So what happened was I went onto MySpace, and I sent him a message. I found his personal page, and I said, I really wanted to see your band play, and I know you played with one of my favorite heroes of all time, Kevin Gilbert. I've always wanted to meet someone who played with Kevin, Would there be any extra tickets you might have? And he's like, well, I don't have tickets, but I could maybe put you on the guest list. It happened. So I walked up, and there was the crowd after I had gone to see Annuals, not the performance, but the sound check. The door was open at the Varsity Theater. I don't know why. I don't know how, but I just slipped in. I was hanging out with the Annuals guys for it was like 30 minutes at least. And I was telling them, I want to stay and see your show so bad. I love you guys. But I'm on the guest list at the Dethklok show. And they're like, Dethklok is here? They wanted to quit their show and go to Dethklok. That was the funny thing about Annuals. Their music is much different. Dethklok would be sort of almost like humor, death metal of a sort. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. Anyway, so that wasn't all. I saw the Dethklok show. That was pretty epic. I love the Kauffman Union. There's another part of Kauffman Union I like even more. It's on Menominee once. But anyway, it was a great show. The walk to and from my car was a bit extensive, as I came to learn always with going to shows at the U of M. But once Cloud Cult had to do that, it was like a 15-minute walk. However, there was still another show later that night. I know Dethklok ended maybe a lot of students were there, so it was probably all ages. It probably ended at 10 o'clock. Well, Battles with White Williams, who I came to learn the drummer from White Williams was Cale Parks. I had no idea who he was. I had no idea who Apes and Androids or Brian Jacobs were, but he was the drummer. I wish I would have known then. But White Williams opened for Battles. And I darted after the show. Well, no, I actually did talk to Mike Keneally for 15 minutes. But then I went, and I don't think White Williams even hit the stage till probably 10:30. I got there, I saw White Williams, and then I saw Battles. The Battles show was a little underwhelming, to be honest. As much as I love that first Battles album, Contend it's basically the only album I really like by them, Mirrored. But anyway, so I had Annual Soundcheck, Dethklok, and then Battles with White Williams even. So, and I saw, Cale Parks presumably, but I did not meet him. I would have... but that was long before the EP that I love, To Swift Mars, even came out. So then the next year, 2008... not a huge one. I can't remember who's on the whole bill, but I saw Baroness and Genghis Tron at the Triple Rock, and then later went to see Between Two Skies. I don't even have the venue. Between Two Skies is a local band. But that was one of note. Baroness, I was kind of getting into. I'm not the biggest Baroness fan, but at that point I was thinking I was beginning into Mastodon and Burst, all those bands anyway. I think my friend actually recorded that show, my friend John Empty. Anyway, so then later in 2008... couple of local bands. Also, We Valedictorian, which it's Jordan Gatesmith's band before he formed Howler and was a part of Total Babe. Howler became somewhat known nationally for a little bit there. He did a show on Halloween 2008 at the Music Box Theater in Minneapolis, which I really loved. That venue was a great show, and the music, I really liked his band. Stuff, the other stuff, Total Babe. Anyway, but I saw Vulnerado, another local band, the same night on later. But that was not surprising because it was just local bands and they're playing late. So going on a couple years later, As Tall as Lions, one of their last tours, maybe their last tour. I know they opened for Mute Math at one point, but I saw them headline April 7th, 2010, with Bad Veins opening at the Varsity Theater. That was probably the peak of my As Tall as Lions fandom as well. And then later that day, I ended up hitting up the 400 Bar, which the Varsity Theater and 400 Bar, 10 minutes away. Judgment Day, who had played with Dredge. Judgment Day, the three-piece, cello-driven, metallic band with no guitars and all instrumental. So they played the 400 Bar. So you had two bands actually that toured with Dredge, because Saul's Lions once toured with them too, in the same city, the same night, and two different venues nearby. But As Tall as Lions at Varsity, and then Judgment Day at the 400 Bar. 400 Bar really isn't around anymore, sadly. All right, so then I mentioned Howler. I saw Howler back later that, like, the next month, on May 14th, 2010. And I don't know how long I stayed for that show, but later that night I saw Jimmy Necco of Ours, of course, with Greg Laswell and Brian Wright at the entry. I don't remember the logistics of that Howler show. I must have gone there after work. I was killing time. I went into Minneapolis. Maybe I went to Cheapo, because the Beat Coffee House, if I'm not mistaken, is not that far from Cheapo. I may have even seen a movie. I can't remember if I did all of that. But Jimmy Necco was the noteworthy one, but seeing Howler as like a separate venue was interesting. So then 2011, the interesting thing about this was I think this was the night of my wife and I's first date. But I ended up going to see Galactic Cowboy Orchestra at the Dakota Jazz Club. And then that show ended maybe like 10:30 or 11. And Brute Heart, local band that's no more, with The Great Confinement, they're broken up. Well, actually, both of them are pretty much broken up now. And Funeral and The Twilight played the Kitty Hat Club. So I ended up doing both those shows. And that was maybe the first or second time I'd seen Brute Heart. So it was kind of a big deal. Again, local bands, but worth seeing. That was March 19th, 2011. Also the fact that I had been on that date, which is weird. I mean, either the first date, or maybe it wasn't the first date, actually, come to think about it. Either that, or we just had, that was one of the days we went to go to Cheapo. I can't remember the 19th of, yeah, that would have been a Saturday, I think, based on the timing of this. So that was probably not the first date. That was the day I got together with my wife. It wasn't the first date. But then 2 years later is the last one I have listed on here, September 22nd, 2013. This is definitely noteworthy, and we went up to Grand Casino it's not in the Twin Cities, it's in Hinckley, Minnesota, kind of on the way to Duluth. And we saw, of course, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees, and also with Peter Noon and David Cassidy. I don't know if David Cassidy's even still around, sadly. But anyway, well, Anathema, their first and maybe last or their final performance in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis was the same night at Mill City Nights, and with Alcest opening. But that show started probably like 9 o'clock, so we drove up. That was noteworthy also. We got Mickey Dolenz a sign. I think that was it. Man, maybe not, because my wife has her Daydream Believer 45 signed by all four members. I think maybe it was the Wisconsin show we saw, because we forgot it. I remember that was why I was so down about that. But yeah, that thing, Mickey I think played first, and then we did see him. We did meet him after the show and a meet and greet quick thing. But it was over by, I would guess, by 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it's about an hour from Hinckley, Grand Casino Hinckley, to Twin Cities. So drove back. I dropped my wife off at home and headed right down to where Mill City Nights was in downtown Minneapolis, and caught Anathema and Alcest. And I remember a friend Josh, that drummer guy, got to interview one of the members, Vince or Danny. I think it might have been Vince of Anathema. So that was one of the more memorable ones. There's another one I don't have on here, but I did see the Deer Hunter once at Station 4, and the same night. I know this specifically because I was actually asked to have dinner with them, and I really wanted to. Let's see if I can find it. When did they play Station 4? They played Station 4. Well, maybe I don't have it on here. I may not have, I don't have every single show I've ever seen on here. All I know is I saw them, yes. And the local band was playing at the Varsity Theater the same night I've never seen, Best Friends Forever. And, but after the show, the Deer Hunter were on the bill, but it was at the Varsity Theater. Station 4 is in St. Paul, in downtown St. Paul. The Deer Hunter, it was probably sometime around 2009, 2008, 2009, 2010, somewhere in that range. I think it was before I was even with my wife. Yeah, it was. But yeah, I don't know who they were on the bill at Station 4 when they played there, but they said, well, we haven't had dinner. You want to have dinner with us? And I'm like, I'd love to, but I want to go see Best Friends Forever. I'd never seen Best Friends Forever. They're local kind of quirky humor prog all-female band. Come to think about that, along with The Warning and Warpaint, I'd put them in that category. But I kind of regret that to an extent, and I probably could have still had dinner with the Deer Hunter and made the Best Friends Forever show. Because I think I got there and they hadn't gone on, so I was sort of regretting that. But what can you do? Anyway, that's the summary. It's close to approximation of all the concert jumps. Maybe I'll do another one if I can think of them. If I come up with the ticket stubs, I can sort of say refer to this video. But yeah, have you ever done a concert jump? I mean, there's festivals, of course. I'm not talking about opening bands, but actual festivals where you're seeing a band after another band. But that's not the same type thing, even if it's at a different venue like Lollapalooza. I mean, Taste of Minnesota is one exception, but have you ever literally seen a show, then gone and seen another show afterwards in a different venue on the same night? I mean, some people can't do it. I don't know if I can really do it anymore. My wife would give me the third degree if I was going to do it again, but it's one of those sort of alternatives / solutions to a passionate music fan that loves live music that has two bands I want to see in one night. I still wish I could have seen Janelle at First Avenue. I got to see her headline at the Barfly, but that was not my favorite concert ever for sure. Even though she was opening, and Foles at the entry would have been nice too because they're always headlining First Avenue. They're playing much larger venues, but sometimes you can't do anything, but sometimes you can if you can time it. The timing works out, and your budget isn't over budget, and it's worth doing. So, but thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.